Taiwan's biggest semiconductor company has announced a $100 billion investment plan in the United States. Now, it's part of the Trump administration's initiative to boost U.S. chip manufacturing. But some are asking what that means for TSMC's position in advanced chip production and, in turn, Taiwan's position at the center of the global semiconductor supply chain. So we're going to try to answer some of them. I'm Devi Gopalan, and this is Connected. Okay, so to help us make sense of the changes ahead for the semiconductors industry in Taiwan and globally, we are joined today by Kristy Su, Director at the Chung-Hua Institute for Economic Research in Taipei, and Dan Nystedt, who is a research analyst with TriOrient Investments in Taipei, which focuses on technology in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Thank you both so much for being on the program, and I'm going to start with Kristy. First of all, TSMC, we know the numbers. TSMC says it'll spend $100 billion on 6 new facilities in the U.S., but can you give us more of a sense of the breakdown?
So this $100 billion US dollars includes 3 fabs in addition to the original 3 fabs already committed in its first investment plan, together with 2 test and packaging factories and also 1 R&D center. So these all together will make around $100 billion US dollars. But so far, we do not have the details, not about the timeline of these constructions and completion of the project, and also not about the resources allocating to each of the project and also the product. So we will just have to wait and see when they come up with more detailed plans.
Right. Dan, I want to focus in on the R&D center in the U.S. It will be the first of its sorts for TSMC in America. How do you think it'll compare to what they're doing here in Taiwan?
Oh, especially in the first few years, it's not really comparable to what's done in Taiwan. Initially, they've already said that initially it's going to be for troubleshooting engineering problems that are in the U.S. so that U.S. engineers don't have to wait until Taiwan wakes up to call back and get something fixed or get something taken care of. They'll have their own dedicated research and engineering institute to take care of those things in real time so there's no lag time. And what's done in Taiwan is the most advanced research. So, of course, that could happen in the U.S. in the future, but you wouldn't expect that from a company that has just set up in the U.S. in the way that TSMC has. Because TSMC, of course, has a very old fab in the U.S., but it's an 8-inch fab. It's older technology, and it was by itself with no new investments for quite a long time. So the new investments are based on getting advanced semiconductor manufacturing in the U.S., which is what the U.S. government wants. So the R&D center, of course, it's good that TSMC is building it there. It will provide good support, but for initially, that's mainly what it's going to be for is engineering support.
Okay, so let's look at the practicality of this, Kristy. You've previously said that it is good business for TSMC to expand overseas, but is it good business to concentrate so much of that expansion in the United States?
Yes, you do remember what I have commented earlier. When TSMC first reviewed its investment plan back in the U.S. back in 2020, 2021, and though it was quite a shock in Taiwan at that time, but most people in Taiwan were convinced that TSMC's decision at that time was market-driven and a necessary response to its customers in the U.S. It had their full support, including then Biden administration's support to access grants under the CHIPS Act. So it is widely believed at that time that TSMC's expansion in the U.S. would strengthen its market position as well as Taiwan-U.S. bilateral relations. And this time, however, is quite different. When C.C. Wei and President Donald Trump announced the $100 billion US dollar investment plan, the response here in Taiwan was very much divided and different from the favorable sentiment last time. Firstly, although from a business perspective, the plan to build altogether 6 fabrications, as already mentioned, to produce chips and 2 factories for test and packaging make business sense because Theoretically, they can achieve economies of scale by increasing production and hence lowering per unit production costs. And this is especially important for chip production outside Taiwan when production costs are usually much higher than in Taiwan. And this is also, if you remember, the same reason that TSMC is building the second fab and planning for the third fab in Kumamoto, Japan. However, the large scale of the investment plans this time pose several questions. First, the amount, $100 billion, which is more than Taiwan government's annual budget, approximately around $90 billion. And it will raise TSMC's expenditure in the next few years to a historic level and may very likely crown out its investment plans in Taiwan and in Japan and in Dresden, Germany. Second, also more worrying is TSMC plans to produce its most advanced technology process node chips in the US, including 2 nanometer and probably even A16 nanometer. This has caused concerns that it may lose its technological edge by technology transfer or losing control of its R&D function. And Taiwan may also weaken its silicon shield, as many people call it here. And TSMC's price in Taiwan stock market immediately fell by around 5% the day when C.C. Wei made the announcement. And since then has continued to be weak. And this reflects the general concerns in Taiwan.
You bring up so many important points there, Kristy, but I want Dan to just weigh in on Taiwan's edge or semiconductor advantage. Is Taiwan, and that is what a lot of the chatter is about, is Taiwan giving away its main advantage?
You know, I really don't think it is. I understand the fears, and Kristy is exactly right about that. There has been a lot of negative media attention over this deal. That's unfortunate. I think one of the key drivers of the deal was the fact that 70% of TSMC's revenue was from the United States last year, and that's pretty constant. The U.S. customers are TSMC's biggest customers, so sometimes moving near your customers is just good business sense, especially if that's what they're asking you to do. And in this case, a lot of them are asking TSMC to do that. So, but you know, it is a concern. The silicon shield is an important asset for Taiwan. It's helped ensure Taiwan's, some sense of military help would be on the way if something happened here. That's something that came up a long time ago. That the idea of the silicon shield is that Taiwan is just as strategically important for its semiconductors as the Middle East is for oil, or as other countries are for a similar kind of resource. So it's a legitimate fear, but at the same time, I think people forget sometimes how big TSMC has grown. And even with that massive investment in the United States, it's still much bigger in Taiwan, and it will continue to grow much bigger in Taiwan. And the chairman of TSMC, C.C. Wei, went on TV with the president of Taiwan and announced that, hey, we're building 11 more production lines in Taiwan over the next few years. So there's still a lot of building going on in Taiwan. There's building projects that have started that haven't even finished yet. So overall, I think Taiwan's position is secure. Even with what's going to the U.S., I really don't think it hurts Taiwan's position in terms of the silicon shield, and that's for several reasons. One is even if you can build enough fabs so that 20 or 30% of chips are made there, that still means that 70% of your chips are made in Taiwan, or 60%, or it's still a big enough percentage that if there's an invasion for any reason, the whole game stops. The whole AI trend stops, and that even goes beyond chips, because around 80% of the AI servers in the world come from Taiwan. So what does it help the U.S. to have chips when the AI servers are also made here? Of course, AI server makers are also investing more in the U.S. to avoid some of the tariffs, because of the tariff issue that's come up. But again, so much of the stuff is made in Taiwan. So much of the expertise and engineering expertise is in Taiwan. In my view, it's really not a big concern or something that you should really get hung up on. I think TSMC is going to be in good hands, and TSMC's management is very strong, and that they'll do very well with this.
TSMC's investment was in response to the U.S. president's signal that Taiwan is too dominant in chips and Washington could impose tariffs at the time. Now, let's listen in on President Donald Trump's reasoning.
As you know, Taiwan pretty much has a monopoly on that market. And I think pretty much is not a term that's even appropriate. They do have a monopoly, and this is a tremendous move by the most powerful company in the world.
Kristy, would this kind of an investment or expansion happen without that push from the Trump administration for TSMC?
I think TSMC, together with its critical suppliers, will continue to invest in Taiwan if the first fab, second fab moves smoothly, because after all, U.S. is the most important market. However, they may have their own pace for doing this investment. They have to wait for the first fab and the second fab, and also they have to probably consider other factors, including the talents issue and also the recruitment issues and challenges right now in the U.S. Because we do know TSMC is facing a lot of challenges, in terms of recruitment, and also they are facing protests from time to time from the labor union in Arizona. So I think together TSMC and its critical suppliers need time to learn about investment in the U.S. And that said, I think it's quite urgent for TSMC and also its suppliers to make a decision at this juncture, because right now we are facing a new administration in the U.S. which would have a very significant policy shifts in terms of not only for imposing possible tariffs, but also for imposing other restrictions or other sanctions towards a trading partner, and therefore that is a very important move. However, I have to mention that because a lot of analysts focus on TSMC's going to U.S. for more investment to avoid tariffs, but I don't think that is a concern. That would be the least concern for TSMC, because though TSMC right now is the major exporter of advanced chips to the United States, but most of TSMC's exports to the U.S. are advanced technology chips, which have no countries or no other chip maker can replace. And therefore, if Trump is going to impose tariffs on these chips, and probably very likely it will be shared by its importers and also the customers. And TSMC has a lot of bargaining chip for that. So I think it's much beyond tariffs for TSMC to do such investment plans.
And speaking of bargaining chips, I want to take a bigger picture look in figures at the semiconductor industry. So let's take a look at TSMC's global positioning in numbers. By revenue, South Korea's Samsung was the largest chip maker in the world in 2024. Now, US-based NVIDIA took first place among chip designers. And overall, 3 of the world's largest chip makers were American. And in third place, Taiwan's largest player was TSMC. But when discussing Taiwan's importance in semiconductors, we often focus specifically on the fabrication of chips. And TSMC last year soared far above its competitors, with its share of worldwide IC foundry revenue rising to almost 70% of the global market. Now, take note, though, this wasn't the only Taiwanese company in the top 5. UMC is also based in Hsinchu, captured another 5% of the global market, leaving the other spots to one Korean, Chinese, and American company each. And in total, Taiwan took an estimated of 77% of foundry revenue worldwide last year. Okay, Dan, we talk about, we put a lot of focus on TSMC. But Taiwan is dominant in manufacturing at the smallest nodes, and that's partially why the TSMC focus comes in. But can you explain how this plays into global demand? As we saw there, there are many other companies producing chips that are producing far more.
Right. Yeah, that's. I mean, obviously, when 2011, November of 2011, ChatGPT came out, and then by January of 23. It already had 100 million users. So that AI exploded. And of course, TSMC's biggest customer, one of its biggest customers, which is NVIDIA, was selling GPUs so fast that by the third quarter of 23, NVIDIA was by quarter was the biggest chip maker in the world. So that's just an idea of how fast the AI trend has gone. And Yeah, TSMC is in the lead of that, and that's due to several factors, but the number one is that their process technology is best in the world, and only a few companies are manufacturing chips at the sizes which right now they're mass producing 3 nanometer chips. They're moving on to 2 nanometer. Second half of this year is when that's expected. And I don't even think NVIDIA is only doing 4 nanometer right now. So NVIDIA still has more advanced processes they can use at TSMC. So in the US, of course, you have Intel, which is working on its manufacturing processes, but it has two issues. One is it's never been a foundry before, and that's a very different business model for a company like Intel. And the second problem is that their manufacturing they had a lull in, I don't know a nice way to say this, they dropped the ball and their manufacturing technology did not improve for several years. And then once they finally started getting back, trying to get back that manufacturing advantage, it just takes time to do that. Sometimes you have to go back and fix some engineering decisions that were made for a previous process, so then move forward. But as they've done that, now they're ramping up more and more of advanced process nodes. And even though they seem like they're doing a decent job, they still have very few customers. There have been a few announcements, but not very many. And I hope the best for them. But it's a difficult industry, and it will always be difficult because it costs about $800 million to design a chip, and nobody wants to put their top design with a brand new foundry they've never done business with before. And beyond that, first, you don't want to give it to them because they might mess it up. And second, if they do mess it up, then your whole production run of your chips is messed up. So it's a big business decision to move to a new foundry. On the other hand, you had Samsung, who has done pretty well in the foundry business, or at least it's done okay. It's been a competitor for TSMC. I don't think it's ever come close to anything TSMC does, but they made some big engineering mistakes at 3 nanometer. The biggest one is they decided to go for a new transistor type that nobody wanted at that time. And as far as I know, they have very few customers for that manufacturing process. And on TSMC's side, how many times does the chairman have to say, 3 nanometer is going to be a long and lasting node for us? It basically announcing this is where all the money is, guys. I would love to see Intel have an announcement with a customer at 3 nanometer. It would be good if Samsung did as well, but Intel has a better chance there because it makes the old kind of transistor. Samsung, I'm not sure if they're going to do that, but that is the mistake they made.
Right. I want to, we talk about the U.S., we talk about, Taiwan, and you also mentioned South Korea there. Kristy, what do we know about what's happening in China? They do produce a large amount of legacy chips. How much of a competition are they for Taiwan? We talk about TSMC's, investment in the U.S., but in reality, China is producing a huge amount, and their advances are happening thick and fast.
Yes, you're right. You are asking about competition from China in producing advanced chips. They are already producing 7 nanometer, though the yield rate is still very, very low. But given 5 to 10 years, and China will be a strong competitor in global market. However, we have to notice that because U.S. and Western countries right now consider dependence or importing Chinese chip may be risking for and also threatening their national security. And therefore, we do see the current decoupling trend of the supply chain of advanced chips. So China and Taiwan may not be directly competing with each other in the U.S. and Western market in the future. However, that said, China is coming very strong in terms of producing mature chips, thanks to their a huge state subsidy and also other non-market intervention. It is estimated that Chinese production and export of mature chips will soon surpass that of Taiwan, because in 2024, Taiwan total export of chips reached 165 billion, while China's export already rose to 106 60 billion. And that said, because this global market will definitely be more competitive to Taiwan, because right now we are losing market share in Chinese market, and also because of this competition from China and also from other newcomers, and it will be more competitive in terms of the mature chips in global market for Taiwan.
Right. I want you to listen to this, and it's in regards to what a disruptor artificial intelligence is now becoming. Now, the US and Chinese companies are currently vying for dominance in AI development, and that requires a huge supply of chips and servers. Chris Miller, the author of Chip War, recently visited Taipei and discussed how the AI race could influence US willingness to expand domestic chip manufacturing even further.
I think for the United States, there's a challenging set of trade-offs, in particular around advanced chip making and AI. I think the Trump administration has said it wants AI dominance as its strategy for artificial intelligence. It wants as many AI models trained and then deployed in the US as it can get. And there's a pretty direct trade-off between your ability to capitalize on AI and the cost of your AI hardware. If your AI hardware costs twice as much, you're going to have a lot less of it. And so I think as the administration in aggregate thinks about how much chip making does it want in the US versus in other countries.
Dan, the reality is domestic chip making in the US has been declining for decades. So how does artificial intelligence, now the advent of it, the race for it, make it even more critical now for the US? And in that sense, how does TSMC's investment then disrupt the market in the US when it comes to chip manufacturing?
Well, it's obviously TSMC is going to be a big employer and a very important part of what's going on in AI in the United States. That's very clear. It's it's an interesting thing. What's going on with AI is it's speed that's probably been one of the key things that stands out to people, because it came pretty much by surprise. People were working on it, and then suddenly there was this ChatGPT came out, and people suddenly jumped on and like, well, wow, this is interesting. We need to move on this. And then so all the competitors jumped on, like Meta and Google and others, and they needed to build data centers, and they needed chips for their data centers, and that's really what propelled it forward. And now how that makes the U.S. chip industry look in the future, well, they're working on Intel. TSMC is obviously going to be a big player there. TSMC is also building in Europe and in Japan, so it's not just going to be in the United States, because there's also been a lot of talk of self-sufficiency and making sure that nations have supply chain resilience. So that's also another aspect. And then just one side note, really quick on the supply chain. It is true that China is doing a lot with the legacy chips, and that's something that the U.S. is also, at least the Biden administration, the CHIPS Act was designed to try to have more of the lagging edge chips made in the United States as well, because it's really important for certain industries. Automobiles is one in particular, and that's one thing where Taiwan still has an advantage there, because a lot of companies still think about, how safe is my supply chain? Do I want to buy chips from China, for example, or should I buy chips from Taiwan instead? And that because Taiwan is more of an ally. So that's another issue that really people forget about quite a bit. I don't see Taiwan being in a bad position, but obviously Kristy's correct. China's growing really fast. They put a lot of money behind their semiconductor industry. They certainly want to be a player with AI, and DeepSeek, when that came out, obviously shows they have a lot of talent to do that with. So it's a very interesting world that's unfolding, and the AI trend is what's carrying it along.
With this interesting world that is unfolding, Kristy, what do you have your eye on in Taiwan when it comes to the landscape for semiconductors, especially when it comes to production and perhaps partnerships that may happen for Taiwan to keep its chip industry relevant?
Taiwan has remained to be the world's #1 in terms of fabrication. And also #1 in terms of testing and packaging. That also includes, very important, the part of the advanced testing and packaging. So far, probably only Taiwanese company, mostly TSMC, can do advanced testing and packaging for advanced chip. And also Taiwan maintained its #2 position in terms of IC design. So overall, this position will maintain for years to come. However, we do face some challenges, and not including the domestic challenges in terms of energy and also in terms of talents. And in terms of talent, also, of course, this cross-strait tension was mentioned by them. So facing that kind of challenges domestically, Taiwan has tried to enhance its partnership with so-called the like-minded country in the past years on semiconductor supply chain. And that's the reason that TSMC, together with its 3,000 suppliers, have expanded from Taiwan to the US, to Japan, to Dresden, German, also neighboring countries, including Czech Republic and also Poland, and also UMC, for example, the second largest chip maker right now, setting full expanding its operations in Singapore, and some companies in Malaysia. So over the past years, Taiwan understands the need to expand or what we call decentralize its supply chain here from Taiwan to around this country, and also build a strong partnership with this country. So we hope that kind of partnership will continue, because we do see support not only from the clients abroad, but also from this government. So with that strong partnership being built, I believe Taiwan, under this a very different and probably very difficult situation, may still maintain its strong position in terms of technology and also in terms of semiconductor supply chain.
Kristy Xu, Director at the Chung-Hua Institution for Economic Research, and Dan Nystedt, Research Analyst at TriOrient Investments. Thank you both so much for taking the time to speak to us from Taipei. And for our viewers everywhere, if you would like to join the conversation and stay connected to tech and business stories from Taiwan, follow us on social media. And remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected.